Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. We said Friday afternoon that not only is this a massive opportunity for Dan Lanning, this Oregon Ducks program, to kind of make a statement in 2024 that this is a national championship caliber team against Ohio State. This was also a massive opportunity for Oregon to really gain some momentum on the recruiting trail. They did just that. I mean, they hosted a ton of talent in the 2025 and 2026 class, and the amount of buzz that the recruits are getting coming out of that game. It's going to be a fun next couple of days and potentially weeks for this Oregon Ducks program on the recruiting trail. And we're kicking it off less than 24 hours after the Ohio State victory. Four-star defensive lineman Tomuhini Topui from Mater Dei committing to Oregon in the 2026 cycle. And I think I want to start with, before we even get into the player, this is the position that Dan Lanning wants to hammer on the recruiting trail. I would go back to what we just saw against Ohio State less than 24 hours ago, where I don't think Oregon wins that football game without difference makers like Derek Carmen on the inside of the defensive line. When you look at Dan Lanning, he knows the blueprint. He was the defensive coordinator of one of the best defenses that I've seen at the college football landscape back at Georgia. What was the blueprint? Having guys who are game wreckers on the defensive line. When you have the ability to stop the run, when you have the ability to get after the passer, it's really easy to play dominant defense. And adding a guy like Derek Carmen had a massive impact on that football game against Ohio State. Dan Lanning wants to get these bodies at the high school recruiting trail level, and he sure landed one with Tomuhini. You look at Tomuhini and say, all right, 6'3", 320 pounds. What stands out to me about this kid is he is a dancing bear for that size. I mean, at 6'3", 320, he has that prototypical nose tackle build, right? A little bit shorter, real thick, especially in the lower half. He can kind of give you the best of both worlds. He can do that two gap and dirty work type stuff where you're keeping your linebackers free, you're winning at the point of attack, but he can also be a difference maker in terms of getting behind the line of scrimmage, giving you some production in the pass rush. It's hard to find those kind of bodies. Like, I would argue last year for Oregon on the inside of the defensive line, it was a lot of guys who could do the dirty work, but weren't necessarily difference makers like Derek Harmon. I look at a guy like Tamuhini and say, this kid is the best of both worlds. He can do the dirty work, but also be a difference maker with the athleticism that he has. Fired up to get into a little bit of the film. Now, before we do, and as always, one massive shout out to the Oregon fans. And a lot of y'all are interested in the recruiting trail. You know I am. We've talked a lot of Oregon over the last 12 months on the recruiting trail. The amount of support y'all continue to show to the boys means the absolute world. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And from what I am reading and hearing, it's going to be a really fun next couple of days and weeks for this Oregon program on the recruiting trail. And without further ado, let's get into Tomuhini Topui. And I think I'm saying that name right. I want to start with just the body composition. This is the type of kid you want to bet on. You start looking at the traits and say 6'3", 320, kind of that fire hydrant build. But what stands out to me about this kid is he's got a 79-inch wingspan. So, yeah, he can play with good leverage. He can play with those shoulder pads close to the ground, play low to the ground, have good leverage, stand up double teams. But he also has a lot of length, and he knows how to use his length to get after the passer as well. When you have that kind of length and you're going up against interior offensive linemen who aren't that long in the arms, it gives you a really good advantage. So he kind of the body type, the frame, I think stands out to you at first. And then I want to talk about the athleticism for the size. Like 6'3", 320, this kid, he's a big boy. And you're going to see that on the film. The footwork, the athleticism that this kid has, they play him at fullback and they'll have him go out and make some plays in space. Like, that's the kind of athlete that you're dealing with a guy like Tamani. And although it might not be the frame that Derek Carmen has, Derek Carmen a little bit bigger, kind of reminds me of the big bodied athlete that Derek Carmen is. You get into the film, and I think you first want to start with, like, this kid off the line of scrimmage, really explosive, violent hands. That's probably where you want to start, playing that nose right there. And this is a kid that actually kind of popped to me when we talked about Aiden Breland in the 2024 class. You start firing up the film, I think it's really impressive. I mean, one, really good get off the line of scrimmage, but more importantly, he will shock you with his hands, and he'll use that length. He'll get off blocks. He'll run the line of scrimmage and go make plays. The combination of power and athleticism that this kid puts on the film, like, you're betting on this kind of kid every single day of the week, and he wins with a lot of different ways. And take a look at this one really good get off, kind of freeze frame, first one off the ball. Look at the juice. I mean, this get off and just making this center pretty much airball, get behind the line of scrimmage, get to the mesh point. I mean, this kid from a footwork athleticism standpoint, and then you combine that with the size, it's special. Now we're using him as a fullback. Get the big dog out in space. And he can move. A good body control, getting upfield, taking it to the house. I mean, this kid at 320 pounds as a sophomore in high school at this film is really, really impressive stuff. You continue to work through the film. A lot of different ways he can win. And we've seen some athleticism. Now we're going to see a little speed to power, just a little bull rush, walk the center right into the lap of the quarterback, collapse the pocket. A lot of different ways this kid can bring value. And again, he can do some of that dirty work and stop the run like this. Love how he gets off blocks. I mean, full extension, throw this guy to the side, go square yourself up and make a play. I mean, he's really, really polished from a technical standpoint, as well as being a really, really good athlete. I think this kid's a really, really fun. Look at look at the guy get out of lead blocking. And this is some big time athleticism from the big dog. Putting this guy in the dirt, I assume. Yep, absolutely. This kid is really, really impressive. And a couple things are standing out to me. One, the dedication that Dan Lanning has had to getting the offensive or defensive line right. You've seen it both in the transfer portal and on the recruiting trail. Right, Dan Lanning is valuing having just different caliber bodies along the defensive line. Not only is that important in terms of competing in the landscape of the Big Ten, where you're talking about you got to have elite line of scrimmage play if you want to compete at the top end of this conference, but I think more importantly, Dan Lanning's looking past just the Big Ten. Like, how do we beat teams like Alabama and Georgia? You got to have line of scrimmage play. And Dan Lanning knows that, having coached under coaches like Nick Saban and Kirby Smart. He's putting a massive priority on just collecting really, really impressive athletes on the defensive line, both on the recruiting trail and the transfer portal. I think, secondly, you want to know what he's doing in modern day. This is a high school that is going to pump out elite power four talent every single cycle. If you can build that pipeline, start grabbing 2, 3, 4 players every single year from that high school, that is a very good pipeline to build. You're seeing Oregon have a ton of success. And the one tricky spot about Oregon is it's not necessarily a hotbed for high school talent. There's some really good football players from the state. You can't build a roster just from the state. And you're seeing Lincoln Riley and USC, for whatever reason, kind of ignore their backyard in California. Dan Lanning said, all right, it's a quick flight down to LA, and we're going to go recruit those guys from the state of California. He's developing pipelines really across the country, but I think most notably St. John Bosco, Mater Dei in California, and he's getting a lot of talent from that high school, bringing it up to Eugene. Oregon's taking care of business on the football field. How do you get sustained success? You continue to recruit at an elite level. Dan Lanning certainly doing that, and it does feel like that game is sent a message to a lot of kids across the high school ranks, and I think it's going to mean something. I think it's going to be a fun next couple of weeks and months for this Oregon team. We'll cut it out there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.